All right, I think we are live. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to our Baptist Health Physician Chat. My name is Jean. I'll be your host and moderator for today. And this speaking event is brought to you by our Baptist Health Partnerships team. Our team is made up of several community organizations, or we have a partnership with them, and that allows us to make more medically integrated programming accessible to the community, such as talks as this with our expert today. So I'm really excited about our topic, which is distress tolerance and acceptance. And our guest here today with me is Kristin Galloway. So Kristin, I'd like for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I love saying hi on Facebook Live because I feel like I'm saying hi to Jean, but I hope there's others who have decided to join us today. So welcome. Like Jean said, my name is Kristin Galloway. I'm a psychologist with Baptist Behavioral Health. I'm originally from Louisiana. I've been living in Nebraska for the last 9 years, so it's really nice to be in the Sunshine State. And I mostly work with adolescents and young adults. So today, my talk is really about managing the roller coaster that is life. You know, I think we have so many stressors out there in the world, whether it is stressors like the pandemic that we're all dealing with, emotional and mental stressors, any of those things that are out there. And when, Jean, I don't know about you, but I think about when I go to solve a problem, the first thing that I do is problem solve, right? Like, I think our brain is a problem-solving machine.
Yep.
And the first thing I want to do is problem solve. So I think about this week. If this week was really stressful for you, what do? We get out the planner and we start problem solving.
I am definitely one for the planning thing. So yeah, this is totally speaking to me.
Yeah. So I think most of us, we get out our planners. I look at what I have to do that week. What are my work responsibilities? What do I need to do for my kid? What home responsibilities do I have? And I start planning it, and I feel so much better. I experience that immediate relief because now all the things that I need to do are on the planner, and I can relax. Great solution. But what about those times when we can't problem solve it, when the problem will not go away? And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is when we're experiencing that distress and we can't problem solve it away.
Yeah.
So, right. So the first thing that I want to mention is that when I'm talking about distress tolerance, I don't know if this is a word that we like use in our common language. Like, I think you hear people say it, but you don't really
Not really. Yeah, and when I was doing some research on it, because I was curious, I was like, I don't think I've ever heard of distress tolerance before. I was like, this is interesting. So could you define it for us, for those who don't know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that by any means I'm the first person to utilize this. I think this terminology has been around for some time, but specifically when I'm talking about distress tolerance is something that is used in DBT. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy, and it was created by Marshall Linehan. So that's what I'm kind of referring to. So if any of you have any experience with DBT, then this is going to sound pretty familiar to you. So I just want to give a shout out to Marshall Linehan and DBT for a second. So what is distress tolerance? And what I like about it is it's in the terminology. So when we think about distress, what is distress? Distress is pain. And that can be any kind of pain that you're experiencing. It could be physical pain. So when I was first teaching distress tolerance to psychology interns, I had just had my baby. And so I used the example of birth as pain.
What a great example.
It's a very painful experience, right? So it could be some sort of physical pain. It could be some sort of psychological pain, any kind of emotional pain. It could be environmental pain. So I think about the pandemic is such a great example of needing distress tolerance. So I would say that the pandemic is a great example, chronic pain. So distress is pain. That's what we're really talking about. Okay. Tolerance is just exactly what it sounds like. So tolerance is your ability to manage that pain. And I think it's important to note that it's not about getting the pain to go away. It's not about problem solving. We can't get the pandemic to go away right this moment, right? We can't get chronic pain to go away. There's a lot of things you could do to manage pain during birth, but there's not a lot of ways to actually get that pain to go away. So these are the situations that we're talking about with dealing with distress tolerance. And the goal is not to get the pain to go away, because if we could, we would, but the problem is that we can't. And so the goal is to be able to manage it. And that's really what distress tolerance is.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense, because I'm sure everyone out there, and I'm just speaking as like a mother and just, managing, different things in your life of, work, things like that. There comes to a point where you're just like, I don't know how to manage this. So this is very interesting. I may take some of these things away with me to practice. So Dr. Galloway, I know you said you had a little image to share with us. Did you want me to pull that up so we can kind of talk through that with our viewers?
Absolutely. That would be fantastic.
Awesome. And while I'm doing that, everyone, just kind of want to remind you that we would love to hear from you throughout this talk. So feel free at any time to drop in the comments, say hello to us. Any questions that you may have, we'll do our best to kind of look through and address all of those. So let me go ahead and pull this up for you, Dr. Galloway. And I'm just going to sit back so that everybody can see this image a little bit better.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think this visual is really helpful when you're thinking about when do I utilize distress tolerance. So looking at the model, you see that there's the problem. So that's what we're looking at. What is the problem? So like I said earlier, if you can solve it, that's fantastic. So if you have a problem, you want to solve it, that's the goal. That's what we're going to try to do, right? So that would be your first go-to. Now, let's say you have a problem and maybe you want to try to change your perspective, right? So I'll use the example of right now, my husband and I are house hunting. And I don't know if you've ever bought a home, for the people out there that are listening, but you can get your heart set on a home and you get so excited. Like, this is the home. It's absolutely perfect. This is everything we've wanted. And then, of course, somebody comes and grabs that house and it's no longer your home. And you have to let go of this idea that this is going to be your house, right? So in that moment, there's nothing that I can do to get that house. That house is gone. Somebody's bought it. So I can't solve it. So maybe I can change my perspective. Maybe the thought process might be, well, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe this is not the house for us. Maybe my thought process is another house will come around. So in certain situations, I might be able to change my perspective about the situation. And that can be extremely useful if I would reframe my thought process. However, sometimes when we are experiencing extreme distress, this isn't very useful. I think about if you've ever experienced having a chronic illness, or maybe your child has been through something really awful, or just has been diagnosed with something that is lifelong, or your life has changed dramatically in some sort of way. And at this time, there's no way to reframe it. So again, that's okay. So these two on the front, the changing your perspective and the solving it, are things that we can do to manage the situation. If we can't do those things, then that's where we're going to jump to distress tolerance. And here in a second, we'll talk about what that looks like. And part of it is that third bubble that talks about acceptance. I do want to just call your attention to the other side, because these are options. I know they're not going to sound like good options, but I think it's important to note that they are options. So when I have a problem, an option is to stay miserable about it. I might not be ready to make any moves. So I think about people who maybe you're going through a divorce and you've just heard news that your partner wants a separation, and maybe you feel similar. And you're not ready to do anything. You're not ready to be skillful. You're not ready to try to survive the moment. You just want to stay sad about the situation. And I think that's okay to give yourself a moment to do that, because I think we need that time and space. Sometimes I think it's extremely helpful to acknowledge that, to just be like, right now, I don't want to make any changes. I just want to stay miserable. The last thing, and this is the thing that we're trying to avoid, is trying not to make the situation worse. So, and this is where distress tolerance really comes in handy. So I'll give you a personal example. Let's say I had a really stressful day at work. I have a lot on my plate. I'm feeling overwhelmed by my responsibilities. And I have a 2-year-old son who is wonderful, and has a lot of emotions. And let's say he's having a really bad day. And so I come home and he's just not wanting to listen to me. He's throwing a tantrum and I'm getting really frustrated because my distress tolerance is low. I'm not able to really manage much at that point. So then I yell at him, and I yell at him in an inappropriate way. It was too much intensity for the situation. So immediately he starts crying and he's even more upset than he already was. So now not only do I have the stress of the day and everything I was already dealing with, now I come home and I yell at my son, and I'm now dealing with him who's doing even worse, and then my guilt, because now I feel bad that I've kind of taken out my anger on him. And so this is really where distress tolerance is beneficial. We as human beings just have this strong urge when we're in distress to just react. And a lot of times those reactions can make the situation worse. In more extreme examples, it might not just be yelling. It might be doing things to harm ourselves in some sort of way. It might be engaging in risky or unsafe behaviors. So distress tolerance, the goal would be to avoid making the situation worse and just trying to tolerate the pain. It's not about feeling better, because oftentimes I can't feel better. If I just went through a divorce, if I am sitting in the waiting room at a hospital and one of my family members has COVID, like I'm not going to feel good in that situation. I'm going to feel painful. We don't want to do anything that's going to make it worse. And so this is where distress tolerance can be really helpful.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. And I'm just thinking too, giving yourself that permission to be that way. I think a lot of times, we're encouraged to think more positively and, try to get over it, but it's not always the right thing to do, in certain situations. So I'm really glad that you went over that, because that makes a lot of sense. It really does. And especially the example, I can definitely relate as a mom. I have a almost 3-year-old, and I'll tell you, he's definitely testing my patience sometimes. And it's to not make the situation worse, because of how you're feeling, and being really aware of that. So those are some excellent tips. And actually, you answered one of my questions too, Kristin. I was going to ask you, if there's, certain circumstances where your distress tolerance is actually lower, like, you kind of build it up sort of in the way that we build up our muscles and exercise, right? And those techniques. But I'm sure, when you're stressed out from work or lack of sleep, it seems like your distress tolerance can kind of be a little bit lower, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So I always use an example of like a soda bottle, so I think that if I have a soda bottle and it's full and I shake it up, that thing is going to explode, right?
Yeah.
Because it's full. If it's, halfway full or, a fourth of the way full and I shake it up, likely it won't explode. So I like to talk about, if we have a soda bottle that's full, we are probably going to do things to make the situation worse because our ability to tolerate distress is pretty low. And so I always try to get people to assess, like, what's in the Coke bottle? Are you running on low sleep? Is your self-care pretty poor right now? Or have you not been able to do things for yourself? Do you have a lot of stressors at work? Because if the Coke bottle is really full, it's going to be quite difficult to be able to manage any other stressors. So sometimes part of the work is learning how to manage and problem solve, right, some of those stressors, so that when we do experience an event like a pandemic or something that is quite hard to deal with, our Coke bottle is low, so that way we can do these skills to manage distress.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So sort of doing those things, like you said, like self-care and getting rest, and as kind of prevention, really, for making sure the Coke bottle doesn't explode.
100%. I think that's a great way to put it. Like, I think a lot of things that we do need to be preventative so that when we have these in the roller coaster of life, because it will be a roller coaster, we can better manage it.
That's excellent. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. And I think I'll definitely, or I know for myself, kind of take that Coke bottle, because that really makes a lot of sense of you don't want to shake it up and for it to explode. So thank you for kind of explaining through that. So I know you mentioned a few of those techniques there, but distress tolerance, there's a few different ways. I think we were talking, before coming on, that you said are different techniques for people. So kind of going into the word acceptance, right? I know in my mind, I have this idea of maybe what acceptance is, and I think everybody does, to some kind of capacity. But could you kind of explain to us in dealing with, in the realm of distress tolerance and that thing? Could you just explain to us a little bit about what do you mean by acceptance, and maybe some myths that people may come across with it?
Yeah, and I'll even back up a little bit to talk about, like, because I feel like what you're saying is like, how do we practice distress tolerance, right?
Yes.
Right. So I think there's kind of two ways to do it. One, which is great, what you're talking about, which is acceptance, and I want to talk about that. The other one, which I think is a little easier for people to consume than acceptance, is survival. So I think when we're experiencing distress, we're either just trying to survive or we're trying to accept the situation. So trying to survive the situation means I'm just trying to not make it worse, and I'm trying not to suffer, but I'm going to experience pain, right? So I think about the example of being, you have a loved one who's in the hospital and they're sick and they're maybe back in emergency surgery. You're going to be in so much pain because you have no idea what's going on. And there's not a lot of control. There's not a lot of things that you can do. So as you're sitting in that waiting room, you're just trying to survive, right? I also think about, and I also don't want to get people caught up in like, this has to be these like really major situations. I mean, I'm in distress at 5 o'clock traffic, so I think about like, if I'm sitting in traffic and I can't go anywhere in gridlock, like that's distress too. Right? So I also want people to think about, what can I do in those moments? So the skills are not difficult. I think it's another component of distress tolerance is being mindful. So I feel like we talked a lot today about being mindful about what is your level of distress and when and why are you using these skills, right? So if I'm in a waiting room, it's acknowledging that I'm in distress, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do anything about the situation. And all I'm really trying to do is either soothe myself or distract myself from the situation. I'm just trying to survive. I like to talk about self-soothing with your 6 senses, and the 6 senses movement. So the rest you have on you, the 6 is movement. So dancing, yoga, walking, whatever that might be, but you always have your senses with you. So what is something that I can do that might be able to calm me down, that might be able to give me some comfort, that might be able just to distract me? And it might be as simple as listening to music. It might be as simple as scrolling through my phone or talking to someone, but it's acknowledging that right now I just need to do something to get through this moment to survive. So I don't think the skills are very complicated. I think it's being mindful of to use them and why you're using them. The other thing that I think about is I think people give up skills easy, like they give up food easy. Like we're trying to teach kids how to eat broccoli or carrots for the first time. If we just expose them once, they'll never eat that again. But maybe if we try them multiple times in multiple scenarios, they could be like, well, carrots are okay, but broccoli, not for me. So I think it's important to try a variety of skills in a variety of situations, and to try them under low distress. So if I were trying to teach a teenager how to drive, I would not put them on 5 o'clock traffic on I-10. It would be disastrous.
Yes,
right?
no.
So we have to learn to drive in a parking lot. So, or wherever you start off. So I think it's also important when you're thinking about distress tolerance, learning what soothes you when you're not under distress. Like, am I a person that, under a little distress, I like to talk on the phone, or I like to listen to music, or, I do feel comfortable going for a drive, or whatever it may be. So I think it's vital to practice these skills outside of that high distress situation.
Yeah, and I can think of just something that I use personally is going for a walk. I mean, there's nothing like for me getting outside, taking a deep breath, feeling the sunshine. So you would say that you said movement is one of the six senses. So you would say that would be one technique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't think the skills are very complicated. I think it's just like if I'm in distress and I need to do something that's either going to soothe me or distract me, then that's a distress tolerant skill. And it's about being intentional about it. So I think that's a great example.
Yeah. And that makes sense too, that you do it under the lower times of distress just because, it then forms a habit, right? And that's the whole point is, practicing that so that when maybe there is a time that it's just almost overflowing, you have that automatic response. Oh, let me go take a walk, or let me go have some quiet time. Let me go listen to some music. So you have that already practiced for yourself.
Yes. And I always like the idea of having something that I don't need another human being versus
Mm-hmm.
something I maybe do because human beings aren't always accessible. So I do like you giving a variety of examples of things that like even my breath, like I always have my breath on me. I can always rely on paced breathing. So trying to think of things too that I would always have access to, I think is vital.
Yeah. No, that's a really good thought because sometimes we think, and this isn't probably not a bad example either, but maybe you could call a friend. But what happens if it's something when your friend's unavailable? What happens? So that's a great point that you made on that.
Yes, working with teenagers, their phones get taken away a lot. So as great as that is a coping strategy, and I don't want to take it away, we want to keep that on the list. We need to make sure that we have other strategies available because your phone's not always for teenagers. Your phone is not always going to be available.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, and so do you think so? Kind of survival is that one technique, and using those different skills, like you said, and then so you said on the other hand, then there's the harder one
Yes.
to do, which is acceptance, right? So you want to tell us, I guess, a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I think acceptance gets a bad rap, and I think it's very misunderstood. So when we're talking about acceptance, the ideal of acceptance is that we are learning to acknowledge that something has happened. And usually the thing that has happened is something that we wish we had control over that we don't. I had no control over the fact that a pandemic happened. And I probably don't have control over, what has been put in place because of the pandemic. Like I don't have control over that. And I wish I did. And if I did, I would change it. But we don't. I can't control that. So I think it's important to know that acceptance is about things that we can't control, and it's not about approval. So I think sometimes when you think about accepting things, people think, "Oh, I must approve of it. If I accept it, I agree with it." And I think the opposite is usually true. Like if somebody broke up with me and I wanted to stay with them, it's really hard to accept that because I wish we were still together. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say that most things that it is helpful to accept, it's very challenging because it's usually something that is hard to accept. Like I think about, if I have a diagnosis that, whether it be physical or a mental health diagnosis, it's probably really hard to accept that. It's probably something that I wish I could change. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that you don't have to agree with it and you likely would want to change it. But usually that's when acceptance is the most helpful.
Got it. Yeah, that definitely reframes it, I think, for myself a little bit differently. Just, when situations are hard because you do want to, well, one, control it, and two, make it better or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and then there's nothing that you can do. Having that acceptance, but then knowing that, it is something that maybe you want to change, but you can't. Yeah, I can see that's definitely challenging and can be challenging depending on the situation. Some may be easier than others. So, would you say that that's another technique that is something you should practice?
Absolutely. So if we think about all the scenarios we've talked about today, I think that all of these things are really challenging. And I think if we had control over it, we would want to change it. I always say when you feel like you don't want to practice acceptance, like when it's the last thing you want to do, it's probably the skill that you need to do. And I've heard this example before, and it was really helpful for me. So I don't know if you've ever been in quicksand. I don't think a lot of people have been in quicksand.
No.
But when you're in quicksand, it starts to take you down, like it starts to just consume you. And I think anybody's natural reaction to quicksand is to fight it, right? Like we want to get out. Like I think our natural instincts would take over, and immediately we're going to try to claw and get out. And what happens in quicksand is the more that you do that, your body would actually go down quicker. Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing that you need to do to survive quicksand is actually space out and almost lay down in it so that you're water soluble. So your body will actually rise to the top.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me that this thing that's going to try to pull me down, you actually want me to lay in it, right?
Like fully embrace the sand.
Yeah. So to me, that's what acceptance is. It feels like the exact opposite of what your gut tells you to do, but actually embracing it is the thing that's going to make you feel better.
That's a really good analogy for that, because I would say I'd be the one fighting tooth and nail to get out and not just lay in it. But that makes sense. It's similar to floating, it just in the survival for swimming too, right? Is that you want to relax your body and kind of embrace the water. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because the thing that we have our natural instincts, right? And so, like in water, my natural instinct is to fight the water, and I'm so scared it's hard to let go, right? Yeah. And the fear that's stopping us from letting go. But what we don't realize is it's the fear that's causing the pain and suffering.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I'm thinking too, just in all the different skills that you talked about and techniques, sometimes when you're maybe, and I'm just thinking of a situation, you go to maybe try that acceptance and then you're not quite ready. So you can always take a step back, try something different, maybe go in that survival mode of, or use that distraction of, all right, let me go for a walk and then come back to it. So it always seems like there is kind of some flexibility when it comes to distress tolerance.
Great point. So I always say acceptance is a process and a journey, not a destination. Gotcha. We won't get to the top of the mountain and we're good. I think that we have a different relationship with acceptance depending on where we're at. Mm-hmm. So in the way that you described it, I always ask people to check in. Am I on the accepting road or the rejecting road? And so even just acknowledging where you are and going back to our little model, maybe I want to stay miserable. Maybe I'm not ready to accept this. Maybe I want to stay in denial. Like maybe I'm just not ready. And that's okay. I think we just have to acknowledge where we're at. And then we say, what would it take for me to get on the acceptance road? Or what would that look like? Because I think the beauty of once you get to acceptance, then there's problem solving. So for example, if I can accept the fact that we're in a pandemic, and I utilize this a lot in the beginning, okay, there's a lot of things I don't like about it, and I'm mad about it, and I'm angry, and this is hard. And the reality is, it is what it is, right? That's what acceptance is. It is what it is. So if this is all going to be my life now, how do I make, as everybody says, this new normal? Like, how can I still live the life I want to live with these boundaries? Because I can't change the boundaries. And the more I try to change the boundaries, I'm just going to get frustrated. So just letting go of that and figuring out, what does my life look like in a pandemic? And I think we've all figured that out. I think we're still figuring it out. But this is where I feel like acceptance is the most useful.
Yeah. Wow. That's very powerful. Really powerful. So we have just like a couple more minutes left. Did you have any I think you had mentioned you wanted to do a quick activity with us. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. I would love if we could do that for our last few minutes that we have. And then I just want to shout out to Anna. She had mentioned, a big thank you for talking to this. She said it was very helpful for her. So thanks for tuning in, Anna, and I'm glad that you're getting a lot out of it. So Kristin, I'll turn it over to you for the activity that we have for today.
Yeah, so we're going to do a mindfulness activity. So if you're comfortable, get in a comfortable space, I would recommend that you close your eyes. If you feel uncomfortable closing your eyes, just please find a gaze on the floor in front of you, so you're not distracted. And I want you to envision yourself on a beach. It's a warm day, you feel the sun, you feel your toes in the sand, you're walking towards the water. You actually dip your toe in, and there's this urge to pull away as the water is very cold. So you keep walking, water's kind of rough. Maybe you're noticing the rocks or the seashells you're stepping in. And the waves are hitting pretty hard against your shins, but you keep walking. You almost have to walk over the waves at this point. Keep going, kind of hitting you at your stomach, pretty forceful, but you can keep walking through the water. And then you get to the point to where the waves start to get bigger. You have to jump a little bit to get past them. And then you get to the point where it's nice and serene, and you can actually just kind of lay in the waves and float and enjoy it. You start coming back a little bit to shore, and you notice this really big wave coming, and your urge is to run. But you can't run. And it knocks you over and pulls you to shore. You're able to get up. You go back in the water and just experience the waves. Emotions are like waves. They come and they go. We can try to run from them, but they'll come here. Think about your emotions like waves. Some are really small, we barely notice them. Some are like that big wave that just feels like it's going to knock us out. And no matter what the emotion is, no how big or how small, we'll pass. So when you experience a tough emotion, trying to think about it like a wave, noticing it, acknowledging it, not making more of it, maybe noticing how it feels in your body, and knowing how big, how small, like every emotion, it will come and it will go. And when you're ready, you can open up your eyes. So thank you for participating. To me, that's just another way to practice acceptance of emotions and just another tool to add to your toolkit.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I feel very relaxed. Awesome. Well, Dr. Galloway, Kristin, thank you so much for your time today. This was very enlightening for me as talking, and I think very timely, considering all circumstances and things like that. So thank you so much, for your time today, and for everyone for tuning in. We're so happy you were able to join us, and I hope you also feel relaxed from that mindfulness exercise. And I want to welcome everyone. We'll be doing these Facebook Lives with our own Baptist Health experts regularly. So make sure you like the Baptist Health page. And we'll actually have our next one next Tuesday at noon. So feel free to tune in. It's on Know Your Numbers. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Galloway. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks so much, everybody.